Welcome back to another episode of Book Depths and Insights, where we explore influential books that open up new ways of thinking. Today, we're discussing Morton Hunt's monumental work, The Story of Psychology. It chronicles the fascinating history of human attempts to understand the mind from ancient times to the present. This isn't just a dry academic textbook. It's a lively narrative about how self-understanding evolved from a vague philosophical idea to a rigorous science. Its importance lies in showing how key ideas evolved, how new theories emerged, and how heated arguments shaped the field of psychology. Morton Hunt, a prolific freelance writer in the behavioral sciences since 1949, writes clearly and engagingly about this complex topic. He has won many science writing awards, including the Westinghouse AAS Award for Best Science Article. Hunt has authored 21 books, including The World of the Formerly Married and The Universe Within, which is referenced in the prologue of The Story of Psychology. He enjoys the human and cognitive sciences. His dedication to The Story of Psychology to Bernice, for reasons beyond counting, his wife is a writer and psychotherapist, suggests a personal connection to the field, potentially allowing him to infuse real-life insights into his academic work. With this background, Hunt presents the history of psychology in a knowledgeable and accessible manner. Let's examine this story piece by piece. Prologue: The First Experiments. Hunt begins the story of psychology by taking us back to the 7th century BC when Egyptian king Psamtik conducted what could be considered the first psychological experiment. Psamtik believed that if children were not exposed to language, they would speak Egyptian, the primal, inborn language of all people. This sets up psychology's long-standing questions, such as how to discern truth, reasoning versus observation, what constitutes valid thinking, and how the mind affects emotions. These questions, which Greek philosophers considered even before Psamtik, still motivate psychologists today. Part 1. Psychology Before Science. This section explores early philosophical inquiries into the mind. The conjecturer's Hunt introduces us to early thinkers like Hippocrates, the father of medicine, and Alcmaeon, who dissected and discovered the optic nerve. Hippocrates developed the theory of 4 senses of humor to naturally explain mental dysfunction, a concept that shaped thought for hundreds of years despite later criticism. Socrates, the midwife of thought, inspired Plato's dialogues even though he wrote nothing himself. Plato greatly influenced philosophy but less so psychology. However, Hunt claims that Aristotle provided history's first fully integrated and systematic account of psychology, encompassing learning, memory, perception, and emotion. Aristotle's approach to mental processes, captured by the phrase "psyche is what psyche does," bears a resemblance to modern cognitive science. His theory of idea associations influenced thinking for 2 millennia. The long sleep after the Greeks, psychology entered a long sleep. Intellectuals continued to ask questions, but mostly as commentators rather than innovators. St. Augustine and other Christian scholars combined Greek and theological ideas to alter thinking about consciousness. We learn about Galen's categorization of emotions and his ill-fated humoral personality theory. Rudolf Gokel popularized the term psychologia in 1590, following Marulik's first use of it in 1520. Proto-psychologists, things began to change with the proto-psychologists. Rationalists like Descartes believed that people are both machines and souls, with the latter being beyond the realm of scientific study. Descartes categorized passions into 6 types. Empiricists, primarily English philosophers like John Locke and Thomas Hobbes, believed that knowledge originates from experience and observation. Locke, the father of English empiricism, rejected innate ideas. He coined the term association of ideas, but David Hartley organized them into a school of thought. James and John Stuart Mill refined associationism, with Mill promoting experimental psychology. Leibniz and other German nativists believed in the concept of levels of consciousness. Kant argued that reason provides general truths, while experience provides limited knowledge. Part 2. Founders of a new science. Scientific psychology truly began in this part of the book. Physicalist Hunt details how figures like Mesmer, whose animal magnetism was a form of hypnosis, and Gall, known for phrenology and early brain research, paved the way. Muller's specific nerve energy theory explained how sensory nerves transmit only specific types of information. Mental functions can be studied in the lab, as demonstrated by Weber and von Helmholtz through their studies of just noticeable differences, nerve transmission speed, color vision, and hearing. Fechner discovered mathematical relationships between stimuli and sensations, thereby advancing the field of psychophysics. These connections are still used in research. Wilhelm Wundt modern psychology began in December 1879 at the University of Leipzig, and most experts agree that Wilhelm Wundt is its central figure. He founded the first psychology institute and taught nearly 200 doctoral students. He instructed both European and American psychologists on how to conduct experiments. Wundt insisted that psychology could be scientific by using experimental results. His concept of psychic parallelism, consciousness mirroring nervous system processes, was crucial to his work. He differentiated between studying immediate experience through experiments, Naturwissenschaft, and higher mental activity through non-experimental methods, Geisteswissenschaft. Despite his influence, Wundt was resistant to applying psychology to real-life situations. William James, although psychology was considered a nasty little subject and only the hope of a science, believed in its potential and became a significant figure in the field. His massive bestseller, Principles of Psychology, 1890, remains a classic. James advocated for naturalistic self-reflection and famously described consciousness as a never-ending stream of thought. He proposed the James-Lange theory of emotion, which posits that physiological reactions cause emotions, a theory that remains influential. His work also shaped educational psychology and mental hygiene. Explorer of the depths, Sigmund Freud profoundly shaped psychology and Western thought, though his ideas have been both lauded and slammed. From a poor background, he became a neuroscientist and developed psychoanalysis. Hunt highlights the talking cure of the Anno case and Freud's controversial seduction theory as significant turning points. After self-analysis, he extensively explored the unconscious. The Psychopathology of Everyday Life, published in 1901, popularized Freudian slips and was Freud's most popular book. His 3 essays on the theory of sexuality, 1905, openly discussed child sexuality, offending many but considered one of his most momentous contributions. Hunt states that Freud's great discovery of the dynamic unconscious permanently enlarged the dimensions and changed the direction of modern psychology. Modern neuroscience even confirms some of Freud's ideas about infantile amnesia and unconscious motivation. The measures this chapter discusses the evolution of psychological testing. Francis Galton invented correlation and regression to measure genius at birth. In 1908, Alfred Binet developed the Binet-Simon scale to assess children's intelligence, marking the beginning of the mental testing movement. Popular tests included the Stanford Binet scale. Lewis M. Terman supported these tests, believing that race and genetics determined intelligence. The chapter also discusses Howard Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences, which challenges the notion of a singular IQ score. The behaviorists this school fundamentally changed psychology by emphasizing observable behavior. Behaviorists, influenced by Darwin, believed that if they could explain animal behavior, they could explain human behavior, discarding mentalist ideas. Edward Lee Thorndike's puzzle boxes and his laws of effect and exercise provided significant insights into natural association. Classical conditioning, discovered by Ivan Pavlov in dog salivation experiments, became a key behaviorist concept. John B. Watson, Mr. Behaviorism, launched this era with his 1913 Behaviorist Manifesto. He argued that psychology should focus solely on behavior, be objective, and aim for the prediction and control of behavior, rejecting the concepts of consciousness and introspection. Watson's Little Albert experiment demonstrated that babies can learn fear. Later, B.F. Skinner became the most famous neo-behaviorist. He emphasized positive reinforcement for operant conditioning and denied the existence of a mind. His work influenced programmed instruction and utopian ideas, as seen in Walden 2. Despite its failure to explain complex human behavior, strict behaviorism emphasized the use of controlled experiments and clear variables. Part 3. Specialization and synthesis. In this part, Hunt explores how psychology diversified and then began to integrate. Gestalt psychology, based on a visual illusion, maintained that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Max Wertheimer founded the school, and Kurt Kafka and Wolfgang Kohler, known for his work with apes and insight learning, expanded it. The idea that relationships are crucial for understanding and perceiving was later accepted in scientific psychology. Personality psychologists study why people differ. Early attempts included Christian Thomasius' rough rating scales and the psychoanalytic theories of Freud, Adler, and Jung. Gordon Allport advocated for trait theory, which uses observable traits. Practical assessment tools include the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory, MMPI, and California Psychological Inventory, CPI, which use real-life questionnaires. Projective tests, such as the Rorschach ink blot test and the Thematic Apperception Test, TAT, aim to reveal hidden aspects of an individual's personality. Raymond B. Cattell was one of the first to use factor analysis to group traits into source traits. Julian Rotter's concept of locus of control and Martin Seligman's learned helplessness challenged the behaviorist view of personality as merely learned responses. The chapter concludes with the widely accepted Big Five model of personality: neuroticism, extroversion, openness, agreeableness, and conscientiousness. Developmentalists study how personality and cognition develop across the lifespan. G. Stanley Hall shifted from child study to rigorous data collection. Jean Piaget is often referred to as a giant for his comprehensive theory on how minds develop from birth to adolescence, which has inspired much modern research. While his specific stages have been refined, his fundamental ideas remain influential. This section also discusses infant memory, language acquisition, including Chomsky's claim of innate linguistic knowledge, the role of culture in psychological processes, and the evolution of cognitive strategies. They also highlight John Bowlby's research on mother-infant attachment and Lawrence Kohlberg's stages of moral development. Social psychologists examine how others affect individuals. This field often bridges the gap between psychology and sociology. Famous experiments include Ash's conformity studies, online links, the prisoner's dilemma for trust, the foot-in-the-door phenomenon for compliance, Rosenhan's pseudo-patient mental hospital survey biases, and Lataine's social loafing. Kurt Lewin, the father of social psychology, promoted field theory to understand group behavior. Leon Festinger's cognitive dissonance theory, which explains how people handle conflicting ideas, was a significant topic. The field also studies social neuroscience, mass communication, and relationships. Despite internal criticism, the crisis of social psychology, many of the field's middle-range theories have been proven true and have practical applications, such as helping lonely people follow doctors' orders. Perception psychologists study how our senses interact with the world. Fechner pioneered psychophysics with sensory threshold measurements. Later, signal detection theory added concepts of noise and subjective expectations. The new look in perception examined how desires and needs affect perception. The mind uses bottom-up sensory information and top-down prior knowledge and context processing to make sense of the world. The development of information processing theory helped us understand how sensations become thoughts. Emotion and motivation psychologists. This field was once neglected, but has seen a revival with the cognitive revolution, which brought hot cognition, emotions, and motivation back into focus. Theories of emotion have evolved from focusing on the body to the nervous system and, finally, to the mind. According to the Schachter-Singer cognitive theory of emotion, psychological arousal and situational evaluation cause emotion. Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs explained everything that motivates people, from basic physiological needs to self-actualization. The chapter also discusses whether emotions are universal, the cognitive meaning of will, and the growing popularity of emotional intelligence, EI. Hunt notes that psychology is still assembling this patchwork quilt of knowledge, as no single theory explains everything. The cognitive revolution, led by George A. Miller in 1960, marked a return to studying the mind in direct opposition to behaviorism. This revolution drew on fields such as computer science, linguistics, and neuroscience. Herbert Simon and Alan Newell created artificial intelligence, AI, which gave us the information processing, IP, or computational model of human thought. Cognitive neuroscience is rapidly growing, particularly with the use of fMRI, which enables researchers to observe brain activity during mental tasks. The field has undergone a complete transformation. Neuroscience and cognitive psychology are increasingly collaborating on the hard problem of how neural activity gives rise to consciousness. Essential concepts include Noam Chomsky's theory of innate linguistic knowledge, George Miller's magical number 7, plus or minus 2, on immediate memory capacity, the three types of memory storage and elaborative processing, and the role of schemas in understanding information. A psychotherapist. This section discusses the growth industry of mental health. Even though some call psychotherapy a non-science or myth and medications are becoming more popular for biologically based disorders, meta-analyses have shown that psychotherapy works, with the average patient doing better than 80% of non-therapy patients. Due to the therapeutic relationship, the dodo bird verdict suggests that different therapies often achieve similar outcomes. Hunt discusses short-term dynamic therapy, behavior therapy, including Bandura's modeling and Walp's systematic desensitization, and cognitive therapy. Dynamic psychotherapies are based on Freud and include the work of Erik Erikson and Harry Stack Sullivan. Albert Ellis developed rational emotive therapy, RET, to address illogical, irrational thinking. Aaron Tim Beck developed cognitive therapy for depression, using Socratic questioning to correct erroneous beliefs. Humanistic therapies like Carl Rogers' client-centered therapy and various fringe therapies, most of which are unproven, are also covered in the book. Users and misusers of psychology. This chapter examines the practical applications of psychology and the associated ethical considerations. Applied psychology, founded by Walter Dill Scott and Hugo Munsterberg, now covers healthcare, education, and business. IQ tests and other psychological assessments are used in college admissions and job screening. Ernest Dichter's psychoanalytic motivational research and Robert Zajonk's mere exposure effect are examples of subtle persuasion in propaganda and advertisements. James Vickery's famous subliminal advertising experiment was later revealed to be a sham. The chapter also discusses the increasing role of psychology in the justice system. It concludes with beyond the fringe practices like NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, and parapsychology, ESP, psychokinesis, which are based on anecdotal evidence rather than scientific rigor. Psychology, a status report. In the final chapter, Hunt provides a status report on psychology as a scientific discipline. Psychologists range from neuroscientists who study mice to psychotherapists who help people. He believes psychology is messy, varied, and disorganized, with unstable ideas that change depending on the research method. There is no single theory of everything. It's more of a patchwork quilt of theories. Still, there is a strong push for cross-disciplinary research and a disorderly integration of subspecialties, such as neuroscience, cultural psychology, and evolutionary psychology. Hunt concludes that understanding the mind is an ongoing process. Cognitive neuroscience may help us understand how brain activity translates into mental processes. Even with its flaws, the book appears to argue that psychology is a growing field essential for understanding the universe within. The story of psychology concludes that psychology is an ongoing, evolving field of exploration. It demonstrates that the field employs a range of methods, from ancient self-reflection to modern brain imaging, to investigate the mind and behavior. This book encourages a deeper understanding of both the grand ideas and the detailed research that helps us define ourselves and our place in the world. It compellingly illustrates humanity's persistent wonder about itself and its actions. Anyone interested in human nature should read it. Thanks for listening to Book Depths and Insights. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, comment, and share. Subscribe and stay tuned for our next deep dive into another thought-provoking book.